Bonjour, hello everyone. Welcome to the session. I'm Pierre Desrochers, Chief Privacy Officer at Statistics Canada. Welcome, bienvenue. I have a very distinguished panel with us today. We're going to talk about cybersecurity for all, addressing the evolving threats. I'd like to quickly introduce them all, and then I'll give them a few questions. And if we have time, we'll have some questions from the crowd. I'll start with Poti Duncan. She's Chief Information Security Officer at Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat. We also have Martin Boyer, Deputy Director Security, Government Services, Central Digital and Data Office, United Kingdom. We have Paul Selby, Chief Information Security Officer and Deputy CIO for Cybersecurity, U.S. Department of Energy. We have Chris Montgomery. He's Field CTO, American Commvault, but previously he spent time as the CIO of the New York City, and I believe he spent some time in the state government. Thank you. Anssi Karkainen, Director General of the Finnish Transport and Communication Agency. And I have to my left, Jonathan Willett, Director General, sorry about that, of Cyber Defense at Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. So, encore, un grand merci. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'd like to start off maybe with Paul. Yeah. So, the Department of Energy has a huge remit. How can you ensure security across such a large department? What strategies do you have in place, and how do you ensure everyone is aware of these and complying with them? To what extent are new technologies helping to make systems more secure? Over to you.
Thanks. First of all, it's wonderful to be here. I have never been in Ottawa before, so this is my first time here. I really appreciate you guys arranging such wonderful weather. I didn't realize that this is not typical for Ottawa. That's normally, like somebody told me, it was 40 below usually here or something. So I got here last night in this beautiful weather and immediately started looking for real estate because I thought, why am I not living in Ottawa? This place is beautiful. So thank you. I really appreciate being here and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about one of my favorite things is cybersecurity, because on one hand, I think we talk about it too much, and on one hand, I don't think we talk about it enough. And what I mean when I say we talk about it too much, I think we're at the risk of generating cyber fatigue. I think we talk about cyber so much that people don't understand what we're talking about anymore. When we look at the cyber landscape and where we're at today compared to where we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't think we're in a lot better shape than we were. And I think in part it's because how we speak about cybersecurity, that people don't understand what we're talking about. We, the cyber professionals, need to change the messaging and make it personal for folks. But yes, the Department of Energy is a huge organization. We have roughly a little over 80 sites and locations in the United States that employs over 100,000 people. We have three main mission areas. One is one to provide energy, obviously, and with that renewable energy, green energy. We have an open science mission that we just create, and we have scientists, employ a ton of scientists who do that. And then, of course, we have our nuclear safety and security mission. So in part, that includes 17 national laboratories. And if you haven't had the experience of working with any of our national laboratories, I highly recommend that. It is completely amazing. My first day at the Department of Energy, I walked into our headquarters, and we have a 1965 Shelby Cobra sitting in the lobby of our office. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. Why do we have a 65 Shelby Cobra fully operational, fully functional? I said, wonder why that's sitting in the lobby of the Department of Energy. That was one of the projects done by one of our open science labs. It's completely 3D printed at Oak Ridge National Laboratories. I've got pictures of it if you want to see it, because I think it's just really cool. So I share that to explain that we have a completely broad mission at the Department of Energy. Our open science mission requires us to collaborate with every country on the planet, even ones that on the other side of the spectrum, on our nuclear side of the spectrum, we would never want to have access to our networks. So it's a very complex problem on how we provide cybersecurity across the board for all of that. So when we talk about complex problems, we've got them in spades. And the strategies we have in place, and I think the strategies are the same for all of us. The key is communication. People need to understand what the problems we're talking about. And you need to talk and talk and talk, and you need to talk in a way that makes it, as I said, makes it personal to people so that they understand exactly what we're talking about. One of the things that still blows my mind is 88% of cyber attacks are a result of human error. I mean, still the number one vector is phishing. So all of us here on stage can do everything right, design the perfect network and have perfect cybersecurity, and someone clicks on something once, and that becomes a problem. So you have to communicate. You have to talk about this over and over again. Again, avoiding cyber fatigue. So we need to change our messaging and figure out how we can deliver a message that resonates with everybody. The last part of your question is new technologies and what are we doing. So one of the benefits we have at the Department of Energy is of the 17 national labs that I mentioned, 7 of them have cyber labs embedded within the national labs that focus on cyber research and new tools to advance cybersecurity. So that is fantastic. So I have a little bit of an advantage in being able to be on the cutting edge of that. I think it's all in our contract when we got here that if we mention new tools, we have to talk about artificial intelligence. Anybody familiar with artificial intelligence? Anybody heard of that? No? Okay. I know back in the States, every conference we go to, we talk about AI. Now, I think that there's a tremendous amount of promise with AI. There's obviously some risks. Having said all of that, there's 2 key points that I hope I can make. One, all of the new technologies, all the promises, all of the advances, the real issue, in my opinion, is basic cyber hygiene. We know what it takes to make things cyber secure. We don't do them, but we know what it takes to make things cyber secure. The basic cyber hygienes, multi-factor authentication, logging, all of those things that we know inherently that we need to do to make our network secure, we need to do that. The last thing that I'd like to point out is that there's this belief that cyber is an impediment to the mission, and that at least I see it happen a lot on a project, an IT project. After about 11 months into the project of a 1-year project, somebody says, ooh, we need to talk to cyber and figure out how to make this thing cyber secure in the last month. That's not the way this is going to work. Cyber has to be part of it from the very beginning. We talk about secure by design. That has to become part of our DNA. We have to be able to operate on that scale. Cyber is not an impediment to the mission. Cyber has to be part of the mission. If you do not have cybersecurity baked into it, you are not completing your mission. And I don't know if this analogy will go over well here because it's something I used back in the States. It's like somebody crossing the goal line in American football and left the football back on the 50-yard line. It doesn't count. It doesn't mean anything. If you don't have cybersecurity as part of it, then your mission isn't complete. It's not an impediment to the mission. It is embedded in the mission.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to do a follow-up maybe with NC. What are the biggest cyber threats for your agency? Are new technologies helping to protect against these threats, or are they themselves creating new threats when used by criminal actors?
Great to be here. Also, first time in Ottawa, as Paul told already, and nice warm days here. I come from National Cybersecurity Center, Finland, and if I think of the threat landscape right now, it's quite challenging. We already heard in the morning the minister telling that after the Russia invaded Ukraine, the threat activity level went higher, and at least in Finland it still stays higher. I guess it's the same thing all over. And of course, lots of threats come from criminals. They are not gone anywhere, they are still there. They are trying to get money from bank accounts, etc. That's serious stuff still. But of course, what is more, I think it's more serious is state actors who are having even more targeted, more sophisticated attacks against, typically against critical infrastructure service providers. And of course, what we see lots of phishing scams, mainly by criminals, also lots of ransomware attacks ongoing, and also some vulnerabilities which they have used to penetrate to the systems. We actually had a quite huge breach in the summertime in Finland. A capital city of Helsinki got hit, and hundreds of thousands of victims in that case. All employees of City of Helsinki, students and their parents. Personal data was lost a lot. Also, just recent weeks, we have had a quite huge DDoS, denial of service attacks against a Finnish bank, and that's a bit challenging, I think, or it a little bit varies from previous ones, because, okay, we have DDoS attacks almost every day, I would say every day in Finland, every week. We face them. They are typically quite short ones, and they don't harm, of course, any troubles a lot. But in that case, this DDoS against that certain bank, it's been lasting many weeks, and also attacker is changing its techniques and tactics during the attack, and it's been very challenging to the bank to fix and change and improve technology to defend against those DDoSes. But of course, like you already mentioned AI, and I have to mention it also. I think when we talk about the challenging technologies, we always talk about AI, and in cybersecurity context also of quantum computing. And I think, of course, we can, and of course we would like to use those technologies to protect our systems, protect our services better in the future. But it's always so that when there is a new technology, criminals and hostile actors, of course, they try to use it for the cyber attacks at the same time, and typically they are many times in couple steps ahead, and it's quite challenging to protect our infrastructure and services against those new type of attacks. I think we haven't seen that much AI-based cyber attacks, but I believe that in the near future we will have more those faster and more sophisticated and more challenging attacks using AI, for example. So you can use AI for attacking, but you can use also it to protect your system, defend your services, and of course there are already many vendors who use AI-based technologies and systems to protect services and infrastructure. But it's kind of always kind of competition ongoing in that sense also.
Thank you, Anssi. And with the beautiful weather, we have colleagues like Anssi coming from Finland, from the United States, and we also have Martin that came over from the UK. So in the UK, Martin, we have a new government with 5 core missions. What does this mean for you in your work in cybersecurity? And have your priorities shifted with the new government?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. You have an utterly beautiful country. And do you know how lovely and friendly you all are? Like, if you step off the curb because you look the wrong way, the driver's just like, oh, hey, yeah. You'll have a real shock if you ever come to London in the UK. Right, so mission-driven government. What does it mean? I have an unofficial definition that kind of works for me in my role. So I think that mission-driven government is about having a really focused outcome that cuts across organizational, traditional boundaries, sectoral boundaries to get that thing done. That works quite well for me because we have traditionally operated within our organizational silos. We've had a real fight in the UK to get people to think about defending as one. So the short answer to your question is, no, it doesn't change my priorities. It amplifies them, and I'll illustrate why. Firstly, mission-driven government is all about cutting through the barriers and getting things done, which means you have to operate across boundaries. That's kind of baked into it. And you have to think end-to-end about what you're doing. The second point about it is that our ministers have made it very clear that they see digital and technology at the heart of the missions. So that's quite interesting as well, because it implies immediately that we're talking about digital services, technology, and information sharing across boundaries. And the third interesting thing about mission-driven government is that it has a very high priority in their eyes. Laura, who you may have heard talk about AI earlier, so in number 10, they have a missions dashboard, right? This gets an overriding priority on things, and it's really handy to tag yourself and what you're trying to do onto an overriding priority. I should just say, I'm going to steal the mission's not done until you baked in cyber. I like that. So I own Secure by Design for the British government. So what do those 3 characteristics mean for cybersecurity? So the first thing is, it forces you to think end-to-end about being secure by design and about being resilient by design. And it drives you towards thinking, if I have to deal with the inevitable incidents that occur, I have to think immediately that I'm going to be able to deal with incidents across all of those boundaries, by default, not by exception. So those are quite powerful. Now, it does slightly terrify some of my more traditional colleagues who are used to thinking, well, if I've got the data set in my organization, I can control it, I know what's happening, I know where I am with my controls. All of that thinking really goes out the window. You have to think much more about how you protect and defend as one. So whilst they might think that's a terrifying thing, I have to think much more about what I'm doing. I have to think much more about risk. I have to think more about how I'm going to make controls and things work across here. But the fundamental point is, it enables. It enables. It drives our thinking on cybersecurity forward, and it has the priority to actually do it and deliver on it. So I'm actually very excited about mission-driven government. I'm not supposed to be excited. I'm a civil servant. I'm supposed to be jolly calm. But actually, I think as a way to drive forward our agenda, it's really superb. So that's my answer. It doesn't change our priorities. It just makes it all more important and amplifies it.
Thank you, Martin. And I'm equally excited about mission-critical government. Speaking of that, let's pass on to the word for our Chris, our field CTO, to talk about this. Chris, you work with a range of public sector organizations. What are the common cybersecurity challenges that you see in the public sector, and what are some of the solutions that can help?
That's a great question, and I spend a lot of time talking with folks about sort of the threat landscape and the challenges that we're seeing in public sector. You know, the reality is, and I think that the pandemic only amplified this, our citizens that we provide service to from a public sector perspective expect to operate with their government in a digital fashion, right? I mean, there's certain levels of sophistication, right? Some people get it faster than others. But the expectation of you know, the communities that we serve are really demanding the same type of experience as they do with their banking and with their commercial interactions. That makes us a very ripe target for bad actors. right? The whole digitally native service orientation of government, this evolution that we're going through, has introduced new risks. And I think often we don't tap the brakes enough to sort of assess our risks at this point in time. So there's some challenges there. And I don't know, how many of you are still also have the pleasure of dealing with a legacy system, right? In my last civil servant job before I moved over to the private sector, I had systems that were designed in 1986 that we were trying to protect from modern cyber threats. The two don't mesh together, right? It's very challenging. So what do we have? We have these complex IT environments. We have, I would say, more modern, forward-thinking policies about data protection and digital government that are coming into bear. And now we've got to really focus on how do we harden these, how do we protect them, and still continue to allow government to innovate. It's certainly a partnership with the vendor community, right? I think we all realize that government has had challenges with resources, right? I mean, there's some very good, talented, some of the best people I've ever worked with have come out of the civil service, but there's not enough of them, right? So we've got to sort of build this partnership and this community of doing good. That's a key point. But we also have to change as an industry. And I challenge my own company and the companies that we partner with to rise to this challenge, right? For the last several years, every new threat that's come about has come with two new shiny new tools and widgets to build into our technology stack. And at the time, that was great because we had to do something specific about those threats and be reactive. But we've invested a lot of time now, and most of the organizations that I've talked to, again, have complex environments that are really causing some stress and some difficulty for their staff to maintain and engage with. But they've also sort of missed a big part of the cybersecurity framework that we're all following, right? And pick your framework, whether it's NIST or the MITRE ATT&CK framework, ISO standards. There's got to be a balancing act between defending, detecting, and response and recovery. And I think we've often missed that response and recovery effort because we've been so focused on being able to protect and defend our environments. And as Paul mentioned earlier, it only takes one successful time, right? One person who's multitasking to click on something bad, and the cascading effects turn into service delivery failures. And so from that nature, I think there's got to be more emphasis to be placed on how do we recover, how do we do it quickly, how do we do it in a way that allows us to, with confidence, project how long it's going to take us. We don't, in government, don't necessarily measure downtime in dollars. I think that's one of the differences that the private sector has, where when you're missing, and services go offline, immediately dollar signs are ticking. It's not exactly the same in government, but I will tell you that the downtime, I believe, is worse because it's often relating to failure to deliver services to the people that need us the most. So I think that complexity in that environment really is what we need to emphasize on. Balance those approaches. Ransomware is not going away anytime soon, so we have to really get into the response and recovery capability discussion.
Thanks, Chris. Some of us in the room probably remember systems we worked on that were built for Expo 67. No? Thanks, Chris. So assessing the risk. I'll pass the word on maybe to Jonathan Ouellet. Can you give us a sense of the range of cyber threats from the Canadian government? How has the type of threat changed over the past years, and what are you doing to get ahead of these attacks? To what extent do you work with international partners on developing cyber strategies and solutions?
Can I talk about the threat we're not facing? That'd be a lot faster. Hey, just for the audience, how many of you are in an organization that's been involved in a ransomware incident? Can you raise your hand just to see? Okay, there's a few. How many of you know about ransomware, generally speaking? Oh yeah, that's pretty good. So ransomware, it's cyber criminals that are like financially motivated. They'll basically compromise your environment. They will crypto lock your data and send you a nice note saying like, please pay this many Bitcoins to us, or you're not getting your data back. And what they'll do if you don't pay is they'll expose that data to the world freely. So it's been really successful in the last few years. I think ransom paid last year, based on some stats that I've seen, like went over $1 billion last year alone. So why is it a problem for government? We made a pledge not to pay ransom in government, but still, like ransomware actors are kind of indiscriminate. They'll look for poor cyber hygiene and take advantage of it wherever it is. So ransomware is something we see on a regular basis in government, and it's due to all kinds of things. They use various techniques, like ransomware actors are not one-trick pony anymore. It used to be like a phishing email that you get, and that's how they get in. Now we see like all kinds of things from poisoning your search result. You go on Google and you search for something, or you go on Bing and you search for something, and they'll promote like links to malicious site and compromise you that way. We've seen like adversary in the middle. We all say like use MFA, and my colleague next to me is a big proponent of MFA. So and it's still like one of the best means to prevent compromises. But adversary in the middle is one way that where actor can get not only access to your credential but also your tokens for your MFA, depending on which MFA you're using. So ransomware is prevalent not only in government, like in everywhere in Canada, that you're in critical infrastructure, in provincial government, that you're a small business owner. And ransomware prey, as I said, like as my colleague was saying, on poor cyber hygiene. We shouldn't have ransomware in government. We should have a cyber hygiene that's at a level where it's not possible for those threat actors to compromise our systems. But it's still happening today, so we have work to do, and Paul will be talking about the things we're putting in place to make that less of a problem. Second type of threat that we face, and some of my colleagues have talked about it, but it's state-sponsored actor. I know Halloween is coming, but state-sponsored aren't ghosts. They exist, and they're after infrastructure, all level of infrastructure, again, on a regular basis. Talk about states like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea are the main actors. But if you want to know, like China dwarfed everybody else. If you put them on a graph, China will be there, and the rest will be a flat line at the bottom. So, and these actors are obviously not motivated by the same thing. They're looking for intelligence about what's going on in government, what's going on in industry. They're looking at R&D, all these type of things. So that's why they compromise like all of systems. The other things that we see for state sponsor around critical infrastructure is like pre-positioning, in infrastructure for future usage. So state sponsor it's a complex problem. There's no easy fix. Collaboration internationally is required for this. Like the Cyber Center is part of the CSC, part of the Five Eyes. We're the CERT for Canada, so we're part of the international community around CERT. We work like in government with TBS, with SSC. We work with industry also. We all need to work together to face that threat. The last threat I want to talk about is like supply chain integrity. We all remember, like, anyway, some of us will remember SolarWinds from 2020. Some of us, yes. But more recently, like, in the news, you've seen a threat actor attempting to compromise a Linux library that's, present in all distro, like the XZUtil library. And that was discovered by a Microsoft researcher, and that kind of prevented, like, what could have been like a really big compromise. There was also like, compromises affecting like the government and industry. Like recently, like Midnight Blizzard, a Russian threat actor, like compromised Microsoft corporate infrastructure. If you want to talk about resilience and what like supply chain integrity can bring, like just look at the CrowdStrike incident. It wasn't a cyber incident per se, but it demonstrated like how we're not ready from a resilience standpoint. Like it brought down like hundreds of organizations worldwide just by publishing basically a bad update on their software. So that was really problematic. So to solve all of these things, and supply chain integrity is probably like the hardest one to fix. Like you're basically relying on your supplier to do the right thing. We need to invest on, like we've secure by design, secure by default, software bill of materials, that type of things are some of the elements that can help us like navigate this complex threat that it is.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I think you've opened up the conversation for Po. I still have a question for you, Po, but I think you already have the direction from your good colleague in terms of what we're looking for. When it comes to protecting critical data, what are the key things officials need to know? What counts as critical data? What's some of the most common vulnerabilities, and what tools and processes should staff be using to address and minimize them? How do you support departments with their cybersecurity plans?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for having me here. Canadians rely on public institutions like the Government of Canada to deliver programs and services, as my colleague alluded to earlier on. And the GC is an attractive target due to its holdings of personal information, valuable research data, and sensitive information that's related to, like, for example, national security. And so these threats can result from software vulnerabilities, hardware vulnerabilities, or other deliberate and targeted attempts, such as those that's identified by Jonathan earlier. And really, the Government of Canada is not immune to these cyber threats. We have been impacted, and we have to take measures to prevent them. And again, definitely supply chain is a big concern of mine. It keeps me up at night in terms of the vulnerabilities, not just within our own government systems, but those of our suppliers as well. We have been impacted, for example, relocation services, where the contractor held many years of data of our colleagues, and it's important for us to make sure that we are disposing of data when it's no longer required, right? So it's super important that it's not just about our government systems, but it's also about our supply chain. And so to protect our data, we need to put in place robust cybersecurity measures. And we already talked a lot about cyber hygiene, it's a common theme. We also have the same mantra in terms of improving our cyber health and really implementing those cybersecurity foundational requirements that are in our existing policies. So from a Treasury Canada perspective, we're a central agency that sets out the rules for government, over 100 institutions who will sort of follow our policies, we hope, policy on government security and the policy on service digital. And in particular, under the policy on service and digital, which is our integrated rules for managing information and reliable digital service delivery, we do have configurations such as multi-factor authentication. So it's not just about MFA on our own government accounts, but it's also about, you should be doing this on your own personal accounts, right? So hopefully, everybody, do you have MFA on your Gmail account? Everybody in the room, if you have a Gmail account, should have your hand up. And so hopefully the next year, everybody will have their hand up when we talk about MFA, not just for your work accounts, but also your personal accounts. And we also need to make sure we're putting in place things like logging, but also understanding what our assets are and putting in place the right host-based protections to protect the asset. And of course, making sure that if there's a software patch out, that you patch. So again, protecting your assets within the Government of Canada, but also your home devices as well. And so we do support our departments in terms of establishing tools to measure their cybersecurity, and we monitor compliance to our policy configurations on an annual basis through their departmental submissions of their service and digital plans. And then supporting this overarching policy framework, we've actually published our first ever GC Enterprise Cybersecurity Strategy in May 2024. This is our forward-looking, proactive plan as a whole of government approach in terms of the cybersecurity of government operations, and really looking forward in terms of strengthening our cyber resilience in terms of our environment. And as part of our environment, to really talk about some of the existing technologies and services that we have in place. So from a technology perspective, we work really closely with our Shared Services Canada colleagues, as well as the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. So within the Government of Canada, we benefit a lot from having the cyber defense posture. And really, as you leverage these services, it goes a long way in terms of protecting those internet-based attacks. We also have cyber defense services that are available on our endpoints, again, protecting our endpoints. And as well, when we adopt technologies such as cloud, we've published the cloud guardrails and also reinforce the need to deploy cyber defense services within cloud-based environments. So it's not just about protecting our assets on-premise, but it's also about protecting our assets that are in the cloud as well. And so one of the other areas that we did get funding for the cyber strategy is the establishment of a purple team. And so that's really a proactive way to do active testing, if you will, and for us to be able to identify gaps and to be able to put in place the measures to protect and defend against bad actors. And one of the other key pillars under our strategy is people, right? So it's really important that we work on a diverse and skilled workforce from a cybersecurity perspective, and really making sure that we have the knowledge for our constituents, and in particular, we work with the Canada School of Public Service, who offers a lot of great courses for cybersecurity, as well as the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity with their Learning Hub. However, as much as we put all these protections in place, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so we do need to have a plan that helps coordinate our activities across the government. And so we do have our GC Cybersecurity Event Management Plan, which is our operational framework that's led by Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat, and work very closely with our Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity colleagues, who's our operational lead in terms of managing cybersecurity events that affect the government at large. We do test this plan regularly from both, unfortunately, real incidents, but also simulated events. And we're always updating our practices just to make sure we're aligned to best practices from industry perspective. So in closing, cybersecurity is a shared responsibility, and we work together to ensure that services to Canadians remain uninterrupted and that Canadian data is protected.
Thank you, Poe. I think we have time for maybe one question for the whole panel. And it's a large panel. And I think I'd like to start maybe off with Paul, Ansi, and Chris, and Martin, because you travel fairly far to come and talk to us today. So I want to hear your thoughts on this. Here's the question for you. It's inevitable that some systems will be affected by cyber attacks. The transport system in London was a recent example for that. What impacts do such attacks have on public trust, and how can we reassure the public that governments are able to keep their data safe? Ansi?
I was talking about those denial of service attacks against one of our banks, and one challenge what it caused was that in Finland we have electronic identification services provided by banks. And in that case, you were not able to use that identification service when this certain bank was under heavy DDoS attacks. So that was a kind of practical problem. How can I identify myself to some other services, for example, governmental services, or using that in the web store or some other services. And in that case, it's all about the resilience. Do we have some other means or services to do that same identification? Because in Finland, we, for example, have a mobile phone identification system. So instead of using banks, you can use your mobile phone to identify yourself. And many citizens, they didn't have any other service than just this certain bank and its services. And in that case, that the service is down, for example, hours or days even. It's very challenging case. But resilience is very, very important.
Chris, did you want to answer?
I think having a cyber resilience plan is critical in this day and age, right? Not having a plan is setting yourself up to failure. But these incidents, are very complex, and they're not necessarily all about technology, right? There's a huge component about this that really is, sort of, do you have the right decision-making framework in play, and do the people that are going to be held accountable for those decisions, are they aware, right? Being able to sort of build that framework and keep those folks engaged, testing that type of plan is so crucial, right? In the world that we live in today, I think communications is a key part of that, both cross-agency, across interdepartmental communications, having those groups collaborate. You can't have them be introduced the first time, learning on the job during the incident, right? They've got to be working together today. But it's also outward, right? If you don't control the narrative of what's happening, someone else will, right? In this day and age, it's on Twitter and it's on the news before half of the people that need to know about it know about it. So I think that's really a critical element of being able to do that. Now, I've worked on the policy side of government and the technology side of government in previous roles, and my favorite quote to that is, Mike Tyson once said, "Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face." So I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a plan, but your plan also needs to be dynamic. It needs to be something that you can pivot on given the incident that you're dealing with at hand, right? It's a framework and it's a guide, but it's not going to be a prescriptive step-by-step, flip this switch, type this code, and send this email. It's going to be much more dynamic and interactive than that. So building those types of frameworks and having those well socialized is the only way you get out of any cyber incident, right? Regardless of whether it's polymorphic malware or something that's well outdated and known that just wasn't patched, right? The technology is almost secondary when we talk about how do you come out of this plan.
Thanks, Chris. Martin, Paul, did you want to add anything to that? Yeah, go.
I guess I think it's been said, the reality is we can't guarantee it. I've been doing this for a long time. I've been a working engineer for over 20 years. I have a master's in cybersecurity. I know how to keep networks secure, but I can't guarantee you the network's going to be secure because there's too many people involved in the network and too many people who can do something that compromise your network. So I agree, you must have a backup plan. But I think the key in the public trust aspect of this is transparency. One of the issues that we face right now in the United States, and I'm reasonably sure it's the same in Finland, and I'm reasonably sure it's the same in Canada, and I'm reasonably sure it's the same in the UK, is cyber breaches are the new scarlet letter. Nobody wants to ever admit that they got breached. There's a sense of shame, there's a sense of privacy, it's I didn't do my job, something. None of that is true, and we've got to figure out how to get past that, because I got to tell you, gang, if you have not been breached, if you work for an organization that has not been breached, it's not because you're good, it's because you're lucky. That's, somebody told me they said the acronym for my job is CISO, C-I-S-O, and it stands for career is soon over. Because you're going to get breached. And if you're going into this with the notion that you're not going to get breached, so we have to be able to talk about this and bring this out into the daylight and not make this the scarlet letter. Everybody talks about CrowdStrike, and we all know that wasn't a cyber incident. Want to be clear, CrowdStrike, not cyber incident. It was an IT incident, but there's a blueprint that we can learn from this that'll help us get better. And one of the things when you talk about transparency, and I'm not advocating or promoting or saying anything, but I think the way CrowdStrike handled that was brilliant. At Black Hat in Las Vegas, right after that incident, they do, it's a kind of a tongue-in-cheek, like a Razzie Award type thing. They gave Black Hat gave CrowdStrike the Epic Fail of the Year award. Do you know what Black Hat did, or what CrowdStrike did? Michael Sentonas, the president of CrowdStrike, showed up, accepted the award in person, and owned it. Said, yep, that was us. We've got to get better. That's what we need to do with cybersecurity. We can't pretend it didn't happen. We can't deny it happened. We can't minimize it. We can't say it was less than what it is. We need to own it, and we need to get better. And that's how we're going to attack this.
Arden, you have the last word.
Thank you. So I think that there are some really simple rules that successful responses to cyber crises, they come out again and again. The first is prepare responsibly, right? Prepare responsibly. If you can stand up and go, look, I anticipated as much as I could about this and we were ready, we got ourselves ready. The second is act with integrity and as far as you can with transparency. And the third is to care about the people who are impacted, right? We all look after the information of our citizens and other people in the country. That's a responsibility. We have to care about how they feel about their information being compromised. I did an exercise recently. We got all of the CISOs across the UK government together, and we went through a cyber incident. But they weren't being CISOs, they were being comms leads. We were all there. We were replying to the equivalent of tweets and Facebook, all of those sort of other social networks are available. And so we got a taste of what it's like to be on the end of this sort of vitriol, the stuff that pours out, and for how different techniques for actually communicating actually land with people. And it was a really fascinating, really insightful exercise. And if you've never done anything like it, I really do recommend that you do. So that third point, behave with empathy for the people who are impacted. And then, you know what? Some people are always going to hate you. But actually, do those three things, and I think the majority of the people will understand that you did your best with what you had.